another great episode of classic Star Trek, and in my humble opinion, one of the best, was Galileo 7. Now, this demonstrates the relationship between the crew and Mr. Spock to a T. And it's an interesting excursion in the rules of Star Trek as far as the Federation goes and command and all that. And it's also just a basic story of survival and the dangers of exploration. So the Enterprise comes across this, nebula, anomaly, whatever, and Kirk feels compelled that they're part of their mission is to explore these things, and so he sends Spock with a crew on a shuttle to go check it out. Well, he probably should have sent an unmanned probe first, but because as soon as they get in there, there's a bit of an ion storm or whatever. It's the interference is so bad it wrecks their electrical work, and it also jams signals and whatnot, so they can't reach back to the Enterprise to get communication. So they have to crash land on a nearby planet within the phenomena. Now, meanwhile, on board the Enterprise, Kirk's being pretty much overruled by this High Commissioner who has a mission of his own for the Enterprise to deliver medical aid to this planet that's had some sort of outbreak. And they're supposed to get over there. He's already irritated with Kirk for diverting for this little side mission. And now this disaster has happened. He's lost his crewmen in that shuttle, and he wants to conduct a search. The commissioner, and this is an interesting thing because it shows Kirk made the wrong decision. The commissioner's his mission should have taken priority. You got these people in need and all that. Plus, like I said, you should have examined this thing more closely before you just tossed your crewmen into it. But Kirk has a time limit here. He says, I've got time to conduct my search. And the problem is, without sensor technology, it's virtually impossible to find them. They locate one planet that they're just guessing they went to. It's the planet with an oxygen atmosphere. And, of course, that is the planet they went to. But what if they didn't? Well, then they're already dead and whatnot. So now he's doing a search in the hopes that they manage to get to this planet. But all he can do is send more shuttles down below to try to locate them. And, it's a big planet. So, meanwhile, the crew finds themselves on there, and they're trying to figure out, well, if we can regain orbit, we might be able to make contact with the ship and get beamed out. But the problem is the ship doesn't have the power to carry their weight. So then immediately Spock says, oh, well, I'll have to choose 3 people to stay behind. And he's Spock, he's cold and everything. And they're like, holy crap. And he's like, well, I'll make the decision. Now, I guess the only criticism here would be the idea that wouldn't these people understand Vulcans by now? The humanity has known them for quite some time, but it's a big universe, and maybe they're not. You hear about it and all that, but then you're actually experiencing a Vulcan's attitude on life and whatnot, and especially in extreme circumstances like that, you got to get irritable about it. So. And one of the things about it was they had these new cast members there that, watching it, I kind of wondered if they thought a couple of these might become regulars themselves, but that it never happens. You have these other officers will show up for one episode and then they're just gone. Besides 2 of them died. And one of the scary parts is the only red shirt they had was Scotty, but he was safe on the shuttle because he had to repair it. So we don't have any fodder. Instead, 2 gold shirts get it in the end, and literally, as one of them is immediately killed by some giant hairy monsters who live on the planet with very large telephone pole-sized spears. And one of the guys gets it immediately right in the butt. Maybe a little higher than that, but nevertheless, yeah, he's done. And Spock comes along and says, oh, well. They're of course, his attitude, and they're upset and everything. This is an example of how Spock, he's in command, and he makes all the decisions, and most of them seem to be wrong. Eventually, the guys, they're saying, look, we got to get our phasers out and take some shots at these guys to scare them off. But Spock says, no, we're not going to shoot them. We'll just demonstrate our superior weaponry. And he assumes that would be enough. But it's pretty obvious early on that it's not. And the guys were right. You're going to have to hurt a few of them before they understand that there's a danger here, and they'll back off. But he never really demonstrates that. The only thing that comes close to it is when one of them starts banging on the shuttle itself while they're inside, and he gets Scotty to manage to electrify the surface outside. And that gives them a little sting, But after a while, they figure, hey, that didn't really hurt, and they come back. So, yeah, you were going to have to put a phaser hole through a couple of them to get the idea across. Leave us alone, but Spock just doesn't foresee this, and then he's like baffled. I responded logically. I did all the correct decisions. Well, they obviously weren't. And then this is the idea that you can't stick to the pure logic thing. You have to consider, because he's being logical, but are the creatures, and he's referring to them as mostly animals. But it didn't occur to him that they were enraged and were somewhat hateful towards these strangers. And that's just an element he didn't consider, and it was a problem. So in that aspect, yes, his officers were correct. You needed to get nasty with him, but it was all too late. He loses 2 men, and it's kind of funny. He says, "I did everything right, and yet 2 people have died." He's all stunned by it, And so, meanwhile, to make matters worse, they've lost fuel and they need to recharge the batteries. So the only way to do it was to drain the energy out of the phasers. Well, this takes away their weaponry. And so Scotty's busy doing that, and eventually they get all set up and they manage to take off. But they only have enough to do 1 orbit in the hopes that they could get a signal out to contact the Enterprise to save them. Of course, by the time they achieve this, the Enterprise has run out of time and is on its way to their destination to deliver the medicine and all that. Because now the commissioner has overruled Kirk, and he's under orders to leave. So as they're going, the shuttle does make orbit, and they're going along, and they realize they can't make contact. The Enterprise doesn't hear them, and this is why it was all for nothing. And they're just going to crash down below. So Spock makes one last gamble and burns the fuel and ignites it to make a flare. And this is seen as rather desperate and irrational and possibly emotional, yes. And before he does this, there's a really great line here between him and McCoy, where Scotty, after Spock says, yeah, we tried, we're not making contact, we're probably just going to crash back down below. And then Scotty said, oh, Mr. Spock, you said there are always alternatives. And he said, did I? Well, I suppose I was incorrect about that, or wrong about it, or whatever, And then McCoy says, well, at least I lived long enough to hear that. And so it looks pretty hopeless. So that's when he decides to go ahead and do the flare. This means they're going to burn up in the orbit rather quickly once it burns out. And it was the last desperate move. But it pays off. Sulu sees it. They manage to beam them back onto the ship, and there you go. They survived, and all of that. So it's very good. The aspect of survival and the desperation, the relationship between Spock as a Vulcan and the humans, all that stuff's explored there. And then, of course, Kirk being frustrated by his limitations and all that. It's all very well mapped out and good. Then the ending bit, which was common of television in those days. You got to end on a joke and laugh while the credits roll. Yes. So they all laugh at Spock again. But 2 guys have died at horrible deaths. But that's the way these shows would do at the time. Everything had to end on a joke, and everybody just laughs, well, yeah, it's too bad about those guys, but we're alive, so we can laugh about it now. Yeah, but other than that, a great episode of Star Trek. And, a lot of scenes of the shuttle itself. So, and of course, they'll reuse, I'm sure they switch that set around. One of the things about it's all soundstage. So they shot the scenes with the ship, of course, and then soundstage for the alien atmosphere. It works fine. Of course, it's, paper mache rocks and whatnot, but it doesn't matter. And besides, a lot of times the soundstage, landscapes or whatever, looked more alien than just having them actually go on location to some pasture somewhere. So, I actually prefer it. So, anyway, all well and good. The Galileo 7, one of the best of classic Star Trek. Thank you for watching and listening. Say, why not like and subscribe and check out that link description below. That'll take you to my mini stores that have plenty of goodies for you. Yes, that's right, you. Most notably, over at IndiePlanet.com, you can get a copy of my comic book Night Night, based on the audio plays of the same name, but now you can see him in the colorful pages of his comic book adventures. So check that out. You can catch the Mr. Nailsin Show on RadioMisfits.com, new episodes every Saturday. And, of course, you can watch my videos over at BitChute. That's the Mr. Nailsin channel on BitChute.com.